Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tips, tools, and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. Today I have guest Ora Nadrich. Ora is a mindfulness coach, international keynote speaker, and founder and president of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. Ora is the author of several books about mindfulness, transformational thinking, and self-discovery. One of her best-selling books, Live True, A Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity, has been named one of the 100 best mindfulness books of all time. Welcome, Ora. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So recent research shows that humans think more than 6,000 thoughts a day. That's a lot of thoughts. And those thousands of thoughts are consequences of our society's obsessive need to be busy and distracted at all times. So our obsessive mental planning and overthinking keeps us from uncovering more heightened states of awareness in which we can participate in life in a more grounded, creative, and aligned way. So Ora and I are going to talk about living in the present moment, learning to disconnect to reconnect. Many of us look for the answers to our everyday questions by seeking guidance outside of ourselves. And we get really consumed with distractions like stimulants, materialism, the news, and other external influences that we believe will give us meaning in our lives. And so we all have the ability to become more awake, more present, and more aware. So Ora, first question, how do we rein in our busy minds so we can step fully into the present moment?
Well, one of the things that really you can start with mindfulness is to have an awareness of your thoughts, because what mindfulness really is the practice of being fully present in the moment of which you are in. So if there's a lot of mental activity going on, you're aware of it. And the more you practice this, the more you become much more discerning about the activity of the mind. And so you could literally say to yourself, wow, my mind is really busy. My mind is really distracted. My mind is taking me out of this moment and is causing me to think or worry about something that could happen in the future. And I want to use those words, what could or might happen. And that's a lot of the times where our mind defaults to. It defaults into two time frames, the future, which isn't here yet, and the past, which is come and gone. So a really good way to rein in those pesky thoughts that really can take over our mind is to have an awareness of them, to note them, and to say, let me bring my focus and awareness back to the moment of which I'm in right now. Let me focus on something. I'm not saying to do away with needing to focus on something that maybe is important that you need to look at. But if it starts to become this overactivity in the mind and it makes you feel distracted or overly anxious, you might want to just do something like focus on the breath, the in breath, the out breath. Take a couple of breaths literally in and out, which grounds us. And then we can kind of think of it as like a pile of paper, messy, pile of papers on our desk. We need to start to sort them out so that we can zero in on what's the most important. And that's really mindfulness 101 really helps us by focusing on those busy thoughts so that we don't react to them.
Yeah, it's like organizing those thoughts, right? You're like, okay, is this a past thought? Is this a future thought? How do I bring myself back into the now moment? Okay, now what's coming up? How do I prioritize these thoughts and kind of put them where they need to be in attention to where we need to focus our attention and our energy?
Exactly. And one of the things which the way you just said it really brings up my last book, actually the book before, Live True, A Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity. And I say there's usually three categories of the way people think. And you can identify with one of them or maybe more than one. And that is that they're some people that I call them future chasers. They're always thinking about the future. What's going to happen next? What am I going to do next? Is this going to happen next? So their minds are usually focused on, again, the future.
Destination. Yeah.
The destination, not the journey. And then I say there are also people that are past dwellers, that they stay stuck in the past and they're ruminating and lamenting, oh, why didn't I do this? And if only that had happened, and that's what their loop is. And then there are those fortunate ones that are present, what I call present experiencers. And they're the ones that really have a easier time because they're aware of it. They're like, look, I'm in the moment and I'm going to enjoy this moment for what it is. And we all need to become better present experiencers.
I agree. It's so funny you say that because I went on a hike with a friend. It was New Year's Eve. And she asked me to look back at the past year and recall something that was meaningful to me. And honestly, I said to her, I don't remember because I'm living so much in this now moment that it's hard for me to even shift my thoughts to even go back to where, to even come up with something. And she looked at me like I had three heads. And so, but for me, it was a very good validation that I am really practicing to live in the now moment. And so, Ora, if you're a past dweller or a future looker, can you train your mind, train your thoughts to live in the present moment?
Absolutely, because once you become, again, aware, and that's the beauty of the practice of mindfulness. Mindfulness is being in the present moment with total awareness. So when you become more aware and you start to really strengthen your mindfulness practice, you start to see when your mind is about to, what I say, slip out the back door. It's trying to like go into the present, it's trying to go into the past. You're like, no, there I go again. And that kind of self-talk is super helpful because we really need to have that kind of self-talk with ourselves because it helps us not default to those places, not to literally allow ourselves to go into those places of distraction, mental distraction, that does nothing really favorable for us, and even the way you described the hike with your girlfriend, we need to do more of that. We need to go, wow, I am so enjoying this moment that there really isn't anywhere else I'd rather be.
Yeah.
And that's another thing about the mindfulness practice is that the moment that you're in becomes enough. You're not always thinking, oh, how can I make this moment better? But that moment might be better. Or, gee, the moment 5 years ago was better than the moment that's happening right now.
Comparing it.
Like you can see how the mind tricks us a lot. And what we want to do is we want to be onto it. We want to be onto the way in which our mind works because it can be a troublemaker.
It sure can. And there's a technique that I learned when I started doing my EFT tapping training. It's called the cancel technique. And I've utilized this myself and I've shared it with many of my clients. And it's really when you're in that loop pattern of a negative thought to literally stop yourself in the conscious moment and say, cancel, and then reset some sort of a more positive thought. And a lot of it is it's bringing those unconscious thoughts to the conscious mind to reset and reprogram those in that now moment.
That's a wonderful technique to use. My books are usually very filled with techniques and skill sets and tips and tools to use. And there's so many things that we can use that really help us stay more present and really enjoy being present. We just need a little bit of help, because again, the mind, and I want to just say this, you said in the introduction, and we actually, believe it or not, this is going to be shocking. We think between 60 and 70,000 thoughts.
Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah. I got that wrong then. That is significantly off.
It's you can Google search it. It's shocking. We're not cognizant of all the thoughts. So where maybe the 6,000 thoughts come from
consciously.
Is like we're consciously, a thought, I was thinking that, this thought just came in. The amount of thoughts that are in the thinking mind daily is staggering.
It reminds me of the visual of the iceberg effect when you see on top of the water, the small part of the iceberg, which is our conscious thoughts. And then underneath the water, you have this ginormous chunk of ice, which is our subconscious mind and those thoughts. And so you're looking at 6,000 thoughts above the water and then roughly 70,000 underneath.
Yes, it just goes to show you the nature of the thinking mind. It's extremely busy. And not all of our thoughts are serving our best interest.
Absolutely. So what are some tips that you can share with the listeners or the viewers on mindfulness tips to stay in the present moment, to bring ourselves back into the now?
Well, it's really good to let's just take a typical day in our lives, because if you were to really sit down and write down the way in which most of your days go, whether it's how you get ready for the day, living with loved ones for those that have a partner and children, you really can start with looking at the times where you maybe were not really fully listening to somebody. You could be having lunch with a girlfriend. You could have been having that hike with your friend, and your mind could have been in so many other places other than where you said your mind was, which was really in the moment with your friend. So what we want to be very aware of is when we're not present, how we're getting hurried and ready to go out the door to work, and maybe our partner or a loved one or a child is speaking to us and we're half listening to what they're saying. And what I say is you really want to start as early as you can with catching the moments that you are not fully in. So that's a great exercise to use. And when I say even think about, maybe recently you had lunch or dinner, or you went somewhere with a friend or a family member or a loved one, and say, wow, I really wasn't fully listening to them when they were talking to me. I was distracted. I was on my phone. I was texting. I was checking my messages. I was thinking about what I was going to make for dinner. These are the kinds of disciplines that we need to really start to put into place. And when we catch that, it's not to judge ourselves harshly, because the mindfulness practice doesn't encourage us to do that. The mindfulness practice just really helps us become more aware.
And observers, yeah.
And as observers, exactly, non-reactors. So it's super helpful. We all do it. I don't care whether you're a mindfulness practitioner or not. We can go out the door, be on the freeway, heading to work, and go, oh, I wasn't really fully listening.
I missed the exit. I've done that before. And I think too, Ora, I notice myself in these times where I'm thinking thoughts in the future, or I'm just completely distracted. I'm not fully grounded in my body. And this is when accidents occur. I'll stub my toe, or I'll drop a glass, or heaven forbid, I rear end somebody or whatever. But it's really those moments when you are completely kind of over here and you're not physically grounded in your body.
And that's why a mindfulness practice is so important, especially the times that we're in right now, because with all of our devices and all of the busyness, our lives are busier now than ever before. And we're very distracted, and we're really prone to multitasking, and everybody's scrolling on their phones. And so it really lends itself to even being less present in many ways, Yeah. So we have to make a concerted effort. We really do, to say, okay, wait, let me stop. Let me put my, I'm a big believer in putting our devices down at certain times of the day and not being on them all day, all night. There's times where we can really stop all that distraction, all that chaos, all that noise, and get quiet. Whether you're a meditator or not, the beauty of mindfulness work is you could literally just sit there quietly somewhere listening to music, and tuning out the busyness, so that we spend more time in the beingness and not always in the doingness of life.
Yeah, and it's like presence is a practice, right? Just like yoga or anything that you would do. So what advice do you have for people who have a difficult time disconnecting, or have a difficult time just being in that stillness and that quietude? You talk about quietude, and I want to talk about that. So, what advice do you have for those types of people? Because, for example, I spent the holiday alone, and I was completely okay with that. I loved every minute of it. And I shared this with a friend, and she was like, oh my goodness, I don't think I could do that. I don't think I could be in that stillness or that solitude. And for me, it was very healing to be in that space. And so, it kind of brought to my attention that a lot of people have a hard time being in their own solitude and in their own aloneness. So what advice do you have for that?
And I talk about that in my books. I really do. And I, like you, I need quiet time for myself as well. I'm one of these people. I actually am very comfortable, which is why I write the books that I write. Being in places with myself that a lot of people try to avoid.
Yes. I'm right there with you on that.
Get comfortable being uncomfortable. And the thing that's interesting is that a lot of people are uncomfortable with things that if they really just tried it or gave themselves the opportunity, they might go, wow, that's really actually, that made me feel good. That's really nice. And I think people sometimes, have a judgment about what does being alone really mean, like, oh, I can't do that by myself. I'm not comfortable being by myself. Well, that's something to explore, because sometimes even if you're in a partnership with somebody, even if you live with somebody, you need time for yourself. That doesn't always include another person. We're not glued at the hip to another person 24/7.
Gosh, I
So
couldn't handle that if I was.
no, that's the other extreme. So what I really say to people is, suggest to them is, you know, find something in your day, one thing that you can do. It doesn't have to be, if you really don't want to do it alone, but I would try that, like take a walk by yourself, and don't take a walk
Without your headphones on.
even as much as I know it's really nice to have those earbuds in and listen to music, I would put that aside and try to walk where you're really listening to the sounds of nature. Listen to the sounds of fall leaves crunching under your feet. Listen to the sounds of birds or chirping, or even crickets, or whatever the natural sounds of our nature, the sounds, the smells, the textures, notice the changes. It's amazing what we end up seeing, and that's another really magnificent thing about a mindfulness practice, is that it really heightens our senses. We suddenly start to see more. We're listening better. We taste our food better because we're really present with the very thing that we're doing, rather than rushing through our meals and rushing through a conversation. Slow it down. And that's the best advice I can give to somebody who's really new to all this. Take that walk, try it by yourself, listen to the sounds of nature, and then check in with yourself and see what you observed. Maybe you notice things that on your last walk you never saw before. How exciting is that?
Exactly. And it also allows us that opportunity to tune into our intuition. And I teach that a lot on my show. I teach how to hear that subtle, soft voice within ourselves. And oftentimes when we're so distracted and we aren't in that mindfulness place, we aren't living in that present moment, we cannot hear that soft voice within inside of us, nudging us onto which direction we need to follow.
That's right. I mean, I think ultimately we miss out on a lot by doing that. There's so much more that we can notice. There's so much more that we can appreciate. There's so much more that we can experience if we really show up in a moment fully present.
Absolutely. So in your books, Ora, you talk about connecting to our higher consciousness. So I want to dive into that more. What is our higher consciousness? What is the concept of a super consciousness? And are they the same? Are they different? Let's talk a little bit more about that.
I think that, super conscious, higher consciousness, one could say that maybe they're one and the same. I speak about the different levels of consciousness because really what I'm saying is that there's different layers and levels of awareness. And that goes back to the mindfulness practice. I have found over the years as a mindfulness practitioner, I've been practicing mindfulness for so long, that what you start to notice, for me, saying how it heightens the senses. So when your senses are heightened, you're so much more open to things. And when you're more open to things, you start to feel things and you can imbibe things that sometimes feel rather magical, sometimes even mystical, or in ways in which you can't even put it into words. And if we don't give ourselves those opportunities and we're just really in survival mode most of the time, which is the level in which we live at, we're really thinking about what we're going to do next. And is this going to be okay? And I got to do this and I've got to do that. When you let that go and you start to allow yourself to be more present, you start to experience things in such a magnificent way that you go, wow, I'm feeling things that maybe I wouldn't even know how to describe them, but I call it higher states of consciousness because it gives our awareness the ability to go into higher states of awareness.
Yeah, it feels almost like out of this world. It's transcending that third dimensional aspect and really expanding. And I know when I started a mindfulness practice, my clairs, I call them clairs, clairvoyance, clairsentience, claircognizance.
Yeah.
Whoa, did those kick up, especially my clairsentience, that clear sense of feeling. And
Totally.
I could sense energies around me that maybe I hadn't noticed before. They were probably there. I just didn't notice them because I was so distracted.
Exactly. And I love that you're saying that because, for someone who hasn't experienced that, what I find with some people, to go, oh, that sounds so way out there and that sounds so esoteric and I don't really know what you're talking about. What I talk about in my book prior to this most recent book I've written, Mindfulness and Mysticism, I talk about how we can go into those areas and really connect to what I called our superpowers, whether it's clairvoyance or, tapping into our intuition or being able to use those more heightened sense of awareness. You can call them what you want, but I think we all have those inner gifts if we develop them. If you're not aware of it, you're not going to cultivate it. And if you don't cultivate it, you're not going to be able to use those gifts that each and every one of us can really strengthen in ourselves. And that gives you the opportunity really to live life in a more interesting way, I think.
Yeah, that makes life so much more fun. And we can tune into shifting our own realities, like through reality transurfing. I'm really big into this. And I
Good
think
for
a
you.
mindfulness practice, just visualizing. And for me, I think when I first started my mindfulness practice, it was really just observing the thoughts. And then once the thoughts started to settle, I started to focus more on visualizing. And that was not easy for me in the beginning. And now it is. But like we said, presence is a practice.
It is. And you start to see, it sounds to me like you have delved into those areas yourself. And so when you go deeper into those areas, you start to feel the higher vibrational capacities of being a conscious human being on the planet. And you can experience life in all sorts of ways, not just in the mundane ways, but you can experience them in a more transcendental way. You
Yes.
know?
And so, Ora, how do we connect with that higher consciousness or those different awareness states? What's the best way to start for someone who's never done this before?
Well, I think again, the best way to start is really to start to, cultivate a mindfulness practice and really work on becoming just a more present human being and making that commitment, So that means that you start to get comfortable even with alone time. You start to allow yourself to go deeper within yourself contemplatively and give yourself the serenity, the quietude, the equanimity that you can experience so that you can start to feel things in ways maybe that you haven't felt before. You have to give yourself that opportunity. So if you're a meditator, for those that meditate, that's the purpose a lot of the times, is to quiet the mind so they can really experience transcending the busy mind. That's one practice. But the reason why mindfulness is something that I think is all encompassing is that it's not just a formal practice of meditation on a yoga mat or a meditation pillow. Mindfulness is having the awareness in all the moments of our lives,
Yes.
not just for 20 minutes in a meditation. So I think the best thing to do is start to do things like the mindfulness walking, mindfulness eating. You could do mindful journaling, go swimming or, take a walk on the beach and start to really feel the water, smell the water, feel the water on your body. Start to give it sort of, if you want to give it, names or descriptions or, how you would want to describe that experience. And it's going to take you into these new places within yourself that you might not otherwise have known about because you are expanding your consciousness. And when we expand our consciousness, and really that's just showing up to allow ourselves to have the experience. Even when I wrote Mindfulness and Mysticism, I thought, wow, mysticism, a lot of people may think like, oh, what is that? What is the mystical experience? When I asked people, I wanted to really demystify mysticism and bringing it into the 21st century and not to just make it be a concept that's thought of as that only mystics can experience the feelings of a mystical experience. That's not true. When I ask people, think back to a time that you could go back to your childhood where you had this magical experience that maybe you couldn't even put it into words, and you had this feeling that came over you and it made you feel something very special, very magical, maybe even very mystical. I can't tell you how many people said, wow, no one's ever asked me that before. I've done meditations like that, and when people went out of the meditation, they said, my God, I remembered experiences that I had going back to childhood, and I didn't even know what they were.
Wow.
I didn't have a name to put on it, but I realized that I went into, children go into those magical realms because they live in the imagination. and they allow themselves to go into those, what can seem otherworldly realms, So
Yes.
everybody can really, if they allow themselves to show up in a moment, free fall into that moment is what I like to call it, and see where it takes you.
Yes.
Try not to control it, but just show up for it.
Yeah, and tuning into that childlike frequency, that childlike vibration. And, you had talked about, really tuning into your senses. And that reminded me of an exercise that I learned when I learned remote viewing. It's called the Ambiance Exercise. And it's, basically you can do it in your home. It's walking from your bedroom into your living room and tuning into your senses. So I love that you brought that up, because this is something we don't even have to go outside to do. You can do this within your home. Smell what the next room smells like. What do you see? What do you sense? How does it hear? How does it feel? And
Exactly. And
you tune into the mystical right in your home.
absolutely, I love that. Well, that's what I say in the book. It's like, you don't have to really do something extraordinary or out of the, some people think like, oh, I have to do something so out of the normal range of experience to experience those moments. No, in mindfulness and mysticism, I bring up two people in the book: Evelyn Underhill, who is a Christian mystic, and Jane Goodall,
Oh, yeah.
and how they both had mystical experiences without premeditating them. Evelyn Underhill was walking down a street when suddenly she felt this magical connection that she couldn't even really put it into words. Same thing happened with Jane Goodall. That's when you're really experiencing what has been called oneness. You're at one with everything. There's no separation. There's no dualistic perception. You're connected to everything. There's no feeling of separation. And Jane Goodall explains in a beautiful way that she was working with, with the apes that she worked with, and suddenly she literally felt connected. It's a beautiful passage I included in the book. She felt connected to everything, the animals, nature, everything around her, and she became one. And that's about wow, that can be a really powerful mystical experience.
Absolutely. And I think it's funny you bring that up, because this last week I've been rewatching the Twilight series. And, I think a lot of people think that they have to venture out into this magical wonderland to have these really intense experiences. And, like you just said, we all have these mystical experiences. Whether we're consciously aware of us having them or not is another story. And we can have them on a large scale, or we can have them on a small scale. And I know for me, living in North Idaho, it's absolutely beautiful here with these beautiful evergreen trees and spruce trees. I mean, it's what you would imagine a magical forest to look like, with the moss and the fairies and, just gorgeous. And so, but in reality, yes, I've had mystical experiences in nature out in those forest lands, but I've also had them just taking a walk around my neighborhood here within my community. And so, and I've had them in my home, like I said. So when it comes down to us really tuning in and tapping in to that, to the mysticism of, those, altered states of consciousness, or those different stages of awareness, how do we tap into the creative inspiration, Ora? How do we really, align ourselves or open ourselves up to experiencing this, what some may call a download, or information coming through to us, that we're in alignment?
You allow yourself to be an open vessel. A lot of people are very, I would say they feel they need to control a moment because it makes them feel frightened to feel like they could be out of control. And I understand that, and you really don't need to think of it in that way, that it's scary to let yourself out of control, because the only way to really step into the unknown is to be willing to allow for the unknown to meet you, or the mystical experience to meet you. You have to really be open to receive it. You have to be open to accept it. So there's that, and that you can really let yourself be the vehicle, the vessel, so that the creative energies and the downloads can come through you. You're really basically saying to the universe, I'm open to you. I'm open to receive, whether you're speaking to the divine presence, whatever that is for you, that's personal and different for everybody. You know, they can call it source, they can call it divine presence, they can call it Christ consciousness, God. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's that you're really opening yourself to allowing yourself to receive, you know. I believe the translation for the word Kabbalah, the book of mysticism, the Kabbalah is to receive. You know, each of us has the ability to receive the information if we're open, you know. And if you're somebody who is prone to judging yourself in that way, be mindful of where your thoughts may go, like, oh, I don't believe in that, or oh, I'm not somebody who, that's not going to happen to me. Be aware of where where you allow your thoughts to take you, because the creative process is something that can really visit anybody and everybody. You can do, you know, free consciousness flowing journaling. You can just let yourself write just the flow of consciousness. You know, a lot of people will say to me as an author, oh, I'm not a writer, or I'm not a painter, or I'm not. I believe that if we really allow ourselves again to free fall and surrender to expressing that divine energy that comes through us, which you can, you know, I've called to download as myself. I've received many downloads.
I don't know what else to call it. Yeah.
Well, I say, people ask me, I'm interviewed a lot about my new book now called Time to Awaken. And I believe that was just a divine download for sure. I had no intention of writing another book right after this last book. And you know, that's the way it works. It's like you just are open and saying, okay, I'm open to receive. I'm open to be this vessel to allow this beautiful light, this beautiful divine light to come through me so that I can express it, you know. And if we think of ourselves, you know, I love that quote by French mystic and philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. Absolutely. You know, let your spirit express itself. You know, there's a exercise that I have called the cosmic dance in mindfulness and mysticism. You know, allow yourself to, like, you know, put on music. This is another great alone activity where you just dance. You know, don't judge yourself. You know, just let yourself express yourself in whatever way that is, and you start to feel that free falling, and that there's no limits to that. You're not putting any of these restraints on you. You're just letting yourself express yourself. And I called it the cosmic dance because we are connected to the cosmos. We are connected to the universe. And it really does, again, let us connect to those higher frequencies and those higher states and stages of consciousness and awareness.
Absolutely. And it's to me, I guess I visualize, I think in analogies often, and I visualize it's just tuning into a radio station. You know, like you said, someone may say, well, I'm not an author, I'm not a painter, I'm not a dancer. Well, why don't you tune into that radio station for a little bit and just experience that and allow that creative energy to flow through?
Exactly. And one of the things I just want to quickly add to that, because I really explored it a lot in mindfulness and mysticism, about the chemicals in our brain. You know, I was taking the position of that we have these natural chemicals in our brain, the endorphins, the dopamine. I mean, our brain reads like a medicine chest. Like, there's so many natural things that can ignite within the brain chemistry. And, you know, when you go into the neuroscience and the neural pathways of the brain, that we can experience these high states without even taking a drug. You know, and that I think a lot of people believe that it's very hard for them to loosen up unless they have a drink or unless they do a drug. And that's why sometimes a lot of people feel more relaxed when they're under the influence of a stimulant or a drug. And what I'm proposing in mindfulness and mysticism, even with something like the cosmic dance or taking a walk, do it without having to take a stimulant or a drug, and start to see what you feel in your senses, because that's when you can start to feel this, like, oh, wow, this feels, I almost feel a little high from this experience, you know. And that is the natural chemistry of the brain. And the more we do that, I believe somewhere in the future, we won't need anything to stimulate the chemicals in our brains. We'll just be able to turn them on at will.
I agree with you on that, Ora, because when I started learning mindfulness practices and breathing techniques, learning how to activate DMT within my own body, I
Yeah.
would then go have a glass of wine with friends, and I felt like it actually lowered my frequency. I felt like I can get into those higher states of awareness through my breath, through my presence, without having to have alcohol to do it, like maybe I would have had in the past. And so for
Absolutely.
me, that was like, whoa, look at the growth that I've had, just through expanding my consciousness.
I know. And again, and I'm so with you, and I talk about that as well. Those natural chemicals that can feel as powerful as as something like DMT, the natural, chemicals and the hormones. It's just mind-boggling what we're capable of.
It's so true. And so, you talking about writing your book. So you're an author, you've written several books. And so, like you said, I didn't even know there was another book coming after that. And that reminds me of Wayne Dyer. He's a famous author. He's passed on, but he said he'd wake up in the middle of the night and get downloads of information. And that's how he wrote most of his books. So talk a little bit about that. How, what is the process that you have gone through as an author, and how have you gotten to yourself to a point where you have actually received information coming through to put on paper?
I would say all my books have been that way. I have a story related to each and every one of my books. My first book is a little bit different because I wrote Says Who, based on a cognitive method of transforming negative and fear-based thoughts, which was really based on a situation where a sister of mine unfortunately became mentally ill, and it took me down deep into a psychospiritual journey. So I wanted to understand the workings of the mind. But again, I felt compelled to write that book. That's the word I would use more, was that I was compelled or called to write that book. My books after that, definitely, like especially this last one, without question, because it was during one of the most powerful full moons that we had. And I said recently, I was interviewed, I don't know which moon it was exactly, but if I backtrack to like writing my book several months ago, it was one of the most powerful full moons we've had. And I felt very resonant. I've always felt very connected to the moon and the moon cycles, and, being a woman, our own cycles, we're connected to that. So there was that. And so what did I do? I allow myself to feel the vibration of that moon. And that's what I talked about earlier. It's like, let yourself really feel, let yourself really imbibe these things that are right around us all the time, that really we can draw from that energy, we can pull from that energy, and it really ignites our own creative energy. So there was that. And then I woke up the next morning and I downloaded my book. It was like, okay, this book is saying, write me and write me now. So that is a perfect example of how, a part of me could have said, oh, are you kidding me? That's like giving birth. I mean, writing books are hard, it's a lot of work. So instead of me going, oh, wow, I don't feel, and intellectualizing it or talking myself out of it, I was like, no. This is such a powerful, divine message, and I believe in divine source and presence. I do. And I believe that, if you really tune into that and align yourself with that, you will be guided to doing things that are really meant for you to do. I allowed for that, and I wrote another book that just came out. So, anybody who's listening, there will always be people going, again, be observant of your thoughts. Oh, I can't do that, or I couldn't do that, or that wouldn't happen to me. Just be aware of your thoughts if or when that comes up. And if that comes up, say, no, that's not true. I am capable of having extraordinary experiences or mystical experiences or receiving downloads just like anybody else is, if I allow myself to be open to receive those messages from on high, from above, from the etheric realms. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's almost like I visualize, I think of it like you've got this cosmic internet out there, or the Akashic record, or the vortex, maybe Abraham Hicks, however you want to look at it. It's all these ideas and thoughts are just floating out there for someone to tune into that vibration, right? So, that book that you wrote could have been for someone else to write, but you tuned into the vibration at the exact moment for that download to come through. Absolutely. For you to share that information.
Oh, it's so interesting that you're saying that, because I was just recently interviewed and someone said to me, wow, you're a wellness practitioner and you're in the mindfulness field. And I don't know anybody who's written this book in this particular way at this particular time. Because the book really covers, the journey that we've been on for the last 2.5 years, which has been
A roller coaster.
how the world turned upside down in so many ways. So I have my own perception of how I saw that.
Mhm.
And so they said, I don't know anybody who's written a book from this angle. I said, well, I guess I was meant to write it.
Mhm.
I guess it was meant to be me because I surrendered to it, and it's a bold book. It's a very bold book for me. I'm very proud of it, and it's being received really, really well. But it's very different than any of my other books, even though there's a very strong mindfulness theme throughout it. Because mindfulness is, again, if it were not for the practice of present moment awareness, we wouldn't see what's going on. Mindfulness is the awareness of what is going on with ourselves, what is going on with others, what is going on in our environment, and what is going on out into the world. So it's like a lens. It just keeps widening and widening and widening. And so my perception of how I see something based on my mindful awareness, or your perception, that's the beauty of this time, is that we can really bring our perceptions to one another. What I witnessed is a very polarized world recently. I thought, no. We have great gifts to pass on to one another and to share with one another right now. Let's not miss the opportunity. This is a very powerful time in our history. I believe the times that we're in right now is the time of a great spiritual awakening.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So that's the way I see it. And so I think it's a very ripe time for us to really level up and expand our consciousness in ways that we can't even imagine.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting because I, like you, have a completely different perception of the last 2 years. When everyone was in lockdown, I was traveling the national parks and living my best life. And, I was not allowing fear to succumb me or overtake me. And so, I myself was just, of course, I was social distancing, whatever. I was in national parks, but with that said, I wasn't going to feel fear strapped down in my home. So it's funny how, you could have a conversation with someone and they would have a completely different mindset around, the last 2 years versus someone else who may have had a mindfulness practice.
I'm so glad, first of all, to know that you were one of those that didn't let yourself be gripped by fear, because we went into an unnatural state of fear. And it's not natural to be in fear for 2.5 years. Let's just go with that. Okay. We're not meant to be in a fight or flight state for 2.5 years. So if anybody's interested in knowing more about that, please pick up my book, Time to Awaken. It's really full of a lot of the things that we're talking about, and I plug it into these areas. So I also said we're living in a time of a parallel universe. There are those of us that maybe are seeing things differently than the way other people are seeing things, and that's okay. We mustn't judge each other harshly. We have to be very mindful of the way in which there was tremendous judgment during this time, and that we really have to allow free will, and we have to allow people to have their own perceptions of A, what they think is best for them, and B, how they see the world and how things are playing out.
Absolutely. And it's all based off of your, like you said, your own perception and your own belief system. And my belief systems change on the daily. I mean, it's like, based off of what I learn and how I'm expanding. And I love how you said how your last book was very different than your other books. And that just shows your growth and, that how that mindfulness practice is really allowing you to expand your consciousness in ways that you would have never imagined all the way back when you wrote Says Who,
That's such a great thing. And thank you for saying that, because that's really what I really want to tell people, that if you commit to present moment awareness, if you really say, all right, bring it on.
I'm ready.
Showing up to life. I'm ready. I'm not in fear. I'm ready to really have this dance with the cosmos, with the universe. Wow. Does it really open up your world wide and far? And it is quite the journey.
It really is. And so, I want to ask one last question. I want to talk about your book, Live True, A Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity. And tell us, how do we align with our authenticity? I've done a few shows on this, and I know this is a struggle for some people that are, I guess that concept of living in the matrix, so to speak. When you want to really break free and become your sovereign self, you've got to pass through your own authenticity. And that can be really hard for people who have been kind of living a program of people pleasing or wearing a mask. So, not a literal mask or even a non-literal
I
mask.
call them lifting the veils.
Lifting the veil. And so how do you, align with that authenticity if you are not used to doing that, or you haven't really ever done that before? Because
again, going back to the times that we're in right now, presently, this is the most miraculous time to live authentically and to be your sovereign self. And, I do believe the way in which the world, the universe functions is that sometimes when we're really evolving, there's gonna be obstacles that are gonna come and test us. Do you know?
Yes.
So you really need to be aware of that, the belief in the sovereign self, that we are these autonomous sovereign beings, these spirits that came into the world. Your spirit, my spirit, we're one of a kind. There's no other you, there's no other me. And that we are on this miraculous life journey of evolution and discovery, and nobody has a right to interfere with that. Nobody has a right to tell us what our future fate and destiny is. We're writing our own stories. We're producing and directing and writing our own movies. So to bring it more down to sort of the simple basic aspects of understanding, where we give up our authentic self. And I might add to that, I have a journal that I wrote during the lockdown, which is the Live True Journal. And that's, I would really almost be like added as another book where you can really gauge. It's so helpful because you can write down where you felt you were being inauthentic, day by day.
Wow.
Like a 30, however many days it takes for you to actually change something. It's like 30 something days before an idea really does become a changed concept in your brain. And just be aware of when you feel like you're being inauthentic. That's the mindful awareness of like, oh, I feel like I have to be this way with this person, and I've got to be this way with this person. I've got to like please this person. Be aware of that. And when that starts to come up, you can ask yourself that simple question: am I being authentic right now? Am I being inauthentic for fear that I don't want to show this person this side to me because maybe they won't like me as much, or they might not love me as much, or they might judge me? This is not about pleasing others to sacrifice your own authentic self. This is about you allowing your authentic self to shine more than ever before. And let people see your sovereign divine being. It's not about dumbing it down. It's not about lowering the volume. It's not about, keeping yourself down. This is about really letting your light, just the radiance of your being, shine through. This is the best time ever to allow that to happen.
Absolutely. And those that are meant to be there at that time, at that frequency, they'll show up. I mean, I think when I started to stand in my power, especially during the last 2 years, I was like, I'm not doing that. That doesn't feel authentic to me, or I'm not going to follow that fear. And I noticed people would kind of repel from me, and then I'd have people magnetize to me. And so I do feel when you start to stand in your true power and your true authenticity, you will begin to recognize that, like magnets. It's like you're going to have that attraction, or you're going to have that repellent, and that's okay. Just go with the flow, surrender to it, and let go who and what needs to go, and allow what needs to come in, right?
More and more people are sensing that now. It might be hard to let go of those that you've known for a long time, but if it's really not supporting your authentic self and you're feeling inauthentic in those dynamics, you might want to really, take a look at them more closely and say, why am I allowing that dynamic to stay in my life? Am I doing it out of guilt? Am I doing it out of, there's an expectation of me? I believe that our life journey is meant for us. And I don't say that selfishly. I say the more authentic we can be, the more we have to share with others. But we will attract those, again, that are more like-minded, and it makes the journey so much more beautiful. It's not that everybody has to agree with us, but everybody's evolving on this journey in their own way, at their own pace.
Yes.
Some people are just evolving in a different way, and I don't want to say this is more advanced, less advanced. We all come in with our own purpose here, and we are meant to evolve on this life journey in the way that is meant for us. And we have to honor that, and we have to allow for that.
I love that. And I do feel there's a correlation between authenticity and alignment. When you are in your authentic self, you are in alignment with who you are meant to be. You're in alignment with your soul. And when you aren't being authentic, you're misaligned. Oftentimes you'll have a harder time finding your path because you aren't being true to yourself. You aren't being true to your soul self.
Yeah. So this is a time to really allow yourself to just full on be who you really are. This is a great time to do that.
Absolutely. So, Ora, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've really enjoyed this. And so how can people connect with you? Where can they find your books? Where can they learn more?
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it too. They can go to my website, oranadrich.com. All of my social media handles are Ora Nadrich. On Instagram, it's Ora Nadrich, but also author Ora Nadrich. I think going to my website, you can really see all of what I'm doing there. If you're interested in ordering my books, Amazon is the fastest way to get them. So I'd say that's the easiest way to connect with me.
Great. Well, thank you, Ora. I really appreciate you. I appreciate the teachings that you're teaching us about mindfulness. This is so important, especially like you said, during this day and age. We need to really focus more, go within, and kind of move away from the chaos and the distractions that have been succumbing many of us over not even just the last 2 years, but some of us, most of our lives, So thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you and your energy.
Thank you.
You deserve to navigate your life in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.theexistentialempath.com.